Okay, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Hello and welcome to Foulger Underwood's latest webinar. My name is Kevin Reid, and over the next 45 minutes or so, I'll be asking questions of Foulger Underwood MD Keith Underwood. It's quite a tongue twister, that. How are you doing, Keith?
Very well. I hope everyone's well and looking forward to a warmer summer, perhaps for the next few weeks or so. Anyway,
Stranger things have happened.
let's say stranger things have happened. Don't talk about
So,
it.
Keith, can I just, because I've got you with me, can you just confirm that the share screen is all working?
Yes, it is.
Very good. Okay, so let's move things on. So you should now be able to see the contents of today's session. The questions that I'll be putting to Keith will revolve around the issues that smaller practices face. We'll also cover real life examples of work that is being undertaken by the team. And our topics for this session are on your screen. We will be talking about succession, managing talent, the exit of founding partners, growth pains, and scale through M&A. And just some quick housekeeping before we kick off. I know we've got lots of ground to cover, so I'll go as fast as possible. For those of you who don't know, Foulger Underwood is a leading advisor to professional services firms, helping them with M&A advice through to succession planning, strategy, and leadership development, among other things. So please visit foulgerunderwood.com to find out more. Stay with us for the time being. We will also be taking questions, and of course, we welcome them. So feel free to use the Q&A button to send them in. I'll either broach them as they arrive if they fit the flow of conversation, and if they don't, I'll just keep them for the end of the session. If you have questions that are you deem sensitive or you just want to have a chat, then please drop Keith a line at keith@foulgerunderwood.com. And if you are watching this as a recording, then please drop a comment in either YouTube or, of course, please email Keith um, after the time. Today's session is running at about 45 minutes or so. And so before we kind of kick into the main topics and the case studies, we're going to have a little bit of a kind of a build up and some context setting from Keith. So, mate, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the webinar. All the participants who've logged in. It's been quite well supported, which is we're pleased to see. And we run these maybe twice a year alongside the market update. But these are specifically focused on independent firms and some of the problems we see with those independent firms. We look very carefully at some of the consulting assignments we get coming through. Independent firms feature to a large extent in those consultancy assignments, fees from 750 through to maybe up to 10 million, which are the smaller end of the market, if you like, that we're dealing with today. They come up with issues which are interesting. They're not all the same, but we do deal with a range of sizes across that range I've just mentioned, usually looking for independents who are perhaps moving towards an MBO, considering an MBO, or indeed considering a sale, which are the sort of two areas we're going forward on. I mean, many independents have gone through the process of talking to the PE houses. We're not going to deal with that so much today. And in general terms, a sale could be a lateral sale in our terms today, to an NLP or a traditional type practice, general practice, which can accommodate the ongoing partners and the business as it goes forward. So what we're looking for, I suppose, is addressing, in the context of what we're doing today, sustainability and growth of the business. Succession we see as something on top of that. In other words, it is an element which has to feed in to the reviews of sustainability and growth, but the basic business should be moving through a stage and plan of its own volition, and people's exits or MBOs bringing new people in should be an add-on, should be an adjunct to the basic strategy.
And
We look at
I think the point we can also make, Keith, is that if you are uh, dealing with a practice that is well structured and is growing, that is going to support you in your succession.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
Hopefully.
we will get to that in one of the examples. So what we've done today is we go on to the second slide. I think we are talking about actual case studies that we have done or are continuing to do at the moment. Present assignments, obviously, you won't be able to identify who they are, but it's interesting some of the problems we're coming across, and we hope that some of these problems will resonate with your own business. But the key factor, I suppose, on the second slide is the exit strategy. And it doesn't really matter whether you're setting up as a sole founding practitioner or you're actually setting up in a sort of 2, 3, 4 partner firm or a growing. The question is, when do you start thinking about exit? A large number of smaller practices in the range we're talking today develop in an unplanned way. They create issues by not having the planning behind or thought process or agreement on objectives. And in terms of being unplanned, they obviously create issues or challenges which need a solution at various stages, and sometimes drastic action, where some of them have very little opportunity to do anything other than to sell to a third party. So we are pushing for long-term strategic plans, which Kevin just referred to. It does take an investment of management time and effort. But key factors here in looking going forward is the risk and reward you're going to offer to either the buyer or the MBO, other partners, ongoing partners, partners being made up from managers within your business. There are two business models you need to consider. One is the goodwill recognition model. And at this end of the market, most people who set up their business, grow it, and are looking for an exit where they will materialize the goodwill value of their business. And that's fine. However, depending upon the level of your success, the value of your exit and the way you get that money out of the business creates some problems, particularly if it's an MBO and you're looking for ongoing partners to pick up your equity. So that's one area where goodwill is recognized. And I suppose the second business model here is where you have a custodian model. Doesn't apply obviously to founders of smaller businesses, but certainly we see practices of around 5 million and above moving towards or maintaining a custodian model, which really means there is less financial effect for the incoming partners. They don't have to buy out the goodwill. They come in, take an equity share, obviously pay for the working capital and the capital account input they have to make, but not necessarily pay out to the exiting partners, who may just leave with the payment of their, if you like, capital accounts, or they may just leave and extend the capital account payments over 5 to 10 years with a very small annuity type payment. Now, the benefits of this we can discuss when we look at the individual scenarios and assignments that we're dealing with at the moment. But sure, the goodwill recognition involves valuation, most likely spread of payments, and providing some funding availability through some association with a third-party funder, which may not, be practical, may not be terribly attractive for the ongoing partners, but at least it provides a sustainability model for the practice going forward. So if we go on to the third slide,
Yeah, all good. Providing for a succession, Keith.
yeah, now this is really the classic situation where everything has been thought through. It is not an urgent situation. And you've got practices. In this particular case, we had a six-partner firm. We addressed their issues, I suppose, in something what we call STUGS, which is not very memorable, STUGS, which really looks at succession planning itself in detail, where there is a long lead time. It is recognized as being an issue for the firm. We then have talent, which we cover on a separate slide. Unforeseen circumstances is the U of STUGS. Growth issues, which is obviously G, and S, scaling. So we will go through those today. But the first one there is succession planning, which if you get it right, leave yourself enough time. I mean, see, we have seen people set up in business or multiple partners setting up in business with a common objective to work for 10 years, 5 to 10 years, and then exit the business through a sale. So the common objectives are quite clear. Everyone buys into them. You may develop your own MBO to buy you out, but otherwise it's going to be a sale in a prescribed time. But as I say in the earlier slide, part of the presentation, practices just the smaller end of the practice lines do not go that route in general. They tend to evolve slowly. They tend to evolve with day-to-day circumstances directing the strategy, and perhaps with little idea of when that exit's going to occur or going to be called upon for an MBO if you've got the right people on board. And we'll deal with the talent shortly.
I mean, that optimal situation you described, Keith, is very much one that's framed around entrepreneurialism, isn't it? You know, we're going to start a business, we're going to get it to a point within a prescribed period of time, and then we're out the door, hopefully.
Yes, and to a certain extent, the whole aspect of professional service firms looks at sustainability, ongoing relationships, not necessarily transactional deals from day to day, but long relationships built between individuals. And that is not necessarily right for a short-term situation where you might want to get in for 5 years and get out within 5 or 10 years as a prescribed original objective. You can do it. People are doing it at the moment. There are more people doing it. Some of the younger professionals are entrepreneurial and they are setting up businesses and then moving on. And we've got an example of one later on. However, in this context, what we're talking about today, yes, we've got a six-partner firm, 5 million in turnover. They know where they want to go. They have their exit values and formulas all ascertained. They have dates when they're going to exit in terms of the senior partners. And therefore, they have multiple generation succession. So in this particular case, we've got three partners exiting within the next 4 years. 2 partners have exited already 3 years ago as being the founder partners, and they're out of it. They nurtured the MBO with their manager and non-equity team and salaried partner team, and have now got this 6 partners in place who are running the business. But they carried through that exercise. And as you can see on the bottom line there, it is multiple generations. So they know who the next team of 3 or 4 are coming through to replace exiting partners. And they're
Keith,
even now talking.
do you mind me asking what the kind of the life cycle of that is, or the from a timing perspective? Is that almost like a 10-year plan, or is that a
No,
5?
they're looking at a 5. They're looking, I suppose, if you want them in actual time frames, they're most likely looking at 5 to 6 years, 5 to 7 years, say, for this to occur. So it's not as if they're handing over to an MBO team of 20-year-olds who've got 30 years ahead of them. There is the top team of 60-year-olds handed over to a team of upper 40s to lower to mid 50s. And the next team coming through is currently in their 40s, and they're being encouraged to take on the leadership roles with training development and bring about an MBO situation which can exit those current partners, as I say, in the next few years. And that'll be over 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
But the point is, they're even looking now at the lower end, going down to the 30-year-old, looking at who they've got on board in the 30-year-olds to get sort of third generation from now lined up to take over and retain the business as an independent. And that is a really interesting, well, we're very positive about this in terms of what they're doing. They want to remain independent. They don't want to put this in the hands of a private equity house and a consolidator. They have solved particular issues up there, which is under the issues side about, yes, we're willing to spend a lot of management time on this, and that's part of the investment. They have also restructured their remuneration plan so that people coming through, even in those lower sections for the second and third phases, are being reasonably well remunerated, but are aware of what is potentially the remuneration when they take the next step up. So yeah, it's an interesting scenario. It is one of the real positives. We do have a number of these we're working with who've got this succession, but I don't think any of them have been as successful at putting through the process, adopting the process, and finding the buy-in from those younger partners to move forward. So there, it's great. It's a great case study. If people can get into this, it's a very early stage thought process as to what everyone's going to do for exits. But yeah, I think that one is one of the benchmarks that we try and move everyone to, albeit very few people start at an early date.
Keith, we're pushing towards the 20-minute mark, so
Sure.
we're going to have to wiggle through.
Well, no, it's okay. So on the next slide, attracting like-minded younger talent. This is most likely a matter of it's a matter of recruitment, being clear on what they're going to be offered. I mean, in that previous one, very clear in terms of what the career path is. The remuneration path, and an understanding of what the vision and communication is within the business. And this can be explained to existing staff, managers, whatever tier they're at, and also can be used in recruiting new people, whether that's recruiting laterally from outside and not necessarily recruiting trainee levels, but yes, it can be done at the trainee level. But you also need to have a story for the lateral hire opportunities and have opportunities to bring people in at when they've got some experience, but not having come up through your own firm. I always go back to that clear career path situation. And when we do an MBO and get involved, we quite often do questionnaires, individual meetings with the individual partners coming through to understand what their aspirations are and how they can work together, what they think the business is going to do for the future. And I think we're very good at that aspect of clarifying which of the managers are going to really perform and come forward, and which those may be considering continuing without equity buy-in. But what we ask them is in this clear path scenario, and it's one you should all ask your staff. Do they understand? I mean, ask them the question: what do you need to achieve to become an equity partner? It's a leading question, and unfortunately, when we do these questionnaires, there is quite often almost a 50-60% response that they're not sure. This is when you're talking to a manager or below a manager, but aspiring manager. We're not sure what it takes to get to the next level. The previous slide were very clear. They have told people what it takes to get to the manager level, what attributes are needed, how they can be developed and nurtured, and the business is quite happy to help them get to that stage, and what you need go from a manager to a partner and then to an equity partner if you've got all those levels. But make it clear, make it part of your strategy, and make sure people understand it, because with that clarity, you get a buy-in, you get enthusiasm, and you get people who are willing to contribute maybe to strategy, development, changes within the organization. They feel part of, leaving people in a pool. Hopefully, you hope you're going to retain them. So at appropriate time, you can approach them with an equity situation or a partner situation is not the way to go. You'll be very lucky if they stay with you. So this career path, I always think, is a key element here.
On this example, on the case study itself, Keith, where it mentions the one retirement, when is that person retiring, or have they retired?
No, that retirement is going to take place in 18 months' time.
In 18 months. And so how many do they have more than one person potentially lined up for that
Yeah, well, this is a
mark?
firm of 1.4 million. It is not, a large practice, but at 1.4, they obviously have restricted number of opportunities internally to move up. So they are going through the process of looking at the people they have. They've got two prospective partners, but we are pushing them to make sure that if those two prospective partners don't make the grade, don't want the position, which is increasingly a perhaps an answer that some of these younger people are getting, because generational interest in getting to the equity level is not as keen as it was previously, perhaps 10 years ago. But what they are saying is lateral recruitment is something they have to consider. So they are working on which we have mapped out, looking at lateral recruitment, which will feed into the growth of the business, and making sure that the offer to that lateral, to that individual who's going to be brought in as proposal B, solution B, if the two aspiring prospective partners don't go through, then obviously, again, we're looking at the business. What does the business need? It needs another partner to come in. It doesn't all stop and go for a sale at that stage. The business has to continue, is our view, excuse me. The business has to continue in that context. If you can't and you don't have the people internally, you've got to find the people externally to come in and move in and grow the business for the future.
And so are they going through a hiring process in tandem?
No, they've got a plan to look at that hiring process in 6 months' time, but they are looking very carefully at getting their what I call ducks in order. They're getting their proposal in order, because if you are going to recruit somebody from a similar size or larger firm, they need to know what they're coming into. They need to know what those remuneration paths are and how they can take it forward, and the vision of the firm. They need to be sold a very positive situation that they want to, and enthused and will compete to get that position that you're offering.
Sure. We have 20 minutes left, Keith, and we've got obviously our three topics, so I will leave you with the maths on that.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much. So on the next slide, that was the younger talent situation, and a lot of time has to be spent on that. However, you always get the situation where we get calls for various reasons that people don't want to continue, or the founding partner has decided he's had enough. And we've had two of these recently, and the one I've got here is a straightforward £1 million worth of fees. It hasn't been in a very planned scenario, and interestingly, the individual is still in his 40s. He has decided to exit. And we always look at these situations internally within Foulger Underwood, and we get the team to look at why this has occurred, what the original objectives were of the founder, and why perhaps he hasn't carried these through in the way he originally intended. And could this sale event, which is now within the next 4 months, could it have been avoided? So we sort of take our own views on this because that helps us tackle similar problems with other clients going forward. So in this unforeseen situation, effectively, he has grown a business organically and bought two businesses. He bought a small business, grew it again organically, and then bought another business only 3 years ago, which means he hasn't got the full payback on that other business yet. But he ran them separately, didn't totally integrate them, and ran them as two separate GP practices. Unfortunately, they weren't even compatible, these two firms. That doesn't mean to say he couldn't have moved them together. They had two separate offices, which he continued to run, but they had different client bases as well, which is a comment, he shouldn't really have bought the second practice because it didn't have that synergistic benefit of being compatible with his own practice, his original practice, and therefore you can't get as much out on the bottom line as one would have hoped. But his comment to us was he sees a lot of integration work to come. He would like to leave that for somebody else and sell the business. But it is clearly an unplanned situation. However, a lot of people end up in this situation, as we say. A lot of practices just evolve with the opportunities on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis. These opportunities are taken. They're not necessarily fully commercially integrated. And this guy is now saying, well, I don't like what's going to happen in the practice in the sector, the accounting sector over the next few years, and I therefore want to get out. So all he's made that decision. He's not going to struggle with it. He hasn't built a second tier team to take over. So that is a straight exit, and it'll be picked up by somebody else to sort it out. Most likely at a discounted value on what he could have got for it if he went through a full integration process and generated a higher bottom line. But the founder is boxed in, basically.
I mean, would the discount also be applicable because you're having to take on two practices that are effectively separate, and the new buyer may want one more than the other?
Yeah, there's been a discussion as to whether we shouldn't sell them as two separate deals. One of them is only 250K, and the other one is the 700K, making up the million. So yeah, there might be a scenario where you do two separate sales to get a better deal. Therefore, you're targeting two different audiences, both of whom might be interested in the A and B deal individually rather than trying to sell the whole thing. Yeah, I agree. That's a good point. So we then go on to growth pains. And this is something which we frequently come across, and we have a number of practices who are in this scenario where they have built a business up to under 2 million usually, but they've built it as individual partners. They're almost individual practices running under one common entity name, one common brand. And the point here is if you grow them like this without investing in the second tier and good quality second tier people, you end up usually with the partners doing most of the work. They don't have time to expand it, so they build up a portfolio maybe of 400,000, 500,000. They perhaps are not very good at delegating. They perhaps haven't agreed the quality of the staff they're recruiting into the pool servicing In this case, there are 4 partners involved. And we are now sitting with them. They want to remain independent. We're now sitting with them, trying to restructure this business, which will require some investment of time and effort. And the one I'm talking about specifically had an interesting situation in that one of the partners thought he was also getting fed up and was thinking about taking his fees and setting up as a sole practitioner. We have actually avoided that situation, and he's agreed to be much more part of a team to change this business. And we've got a focus for them to grow to 2.5 million over the next 5 years. They're going to have to change some of their processes. They're going to have to change how they operate, and they're going to have to invest in better quality second tier staff.
I was going to say, Keith, where everyone has been heads down, kind of changing the direction of those 4 cruise liners, if you like, all in onto a different path, but all together, it must be very fragile. It would not take much for one to just say, actually, this 3-year plan or 5-year plan or whatever it will, because it will not be a 6-month plan. Actually, I've changed my mind or I don't fancy it. There's going to be a lot of careful communication and managing to
Yeah.
pivot this business.
No, absolutely. And it's not unusual for us to find in 4 partners in this situation, one of them, as one has done here, basically, although we have recovered him, if you like, but one of them saying, I'd prefer to take my £400,000 worth of fees and go off and do it myself. That's really, in our view, not very attractive. I mean, say the idea of being a sole practitioner these days with all the regulatory side and the backup to, if you like, give comfort to your clients that there is backup in your organization, you have a reasonable size, it's not unusual. Somebody will go off and do it. And we've had a number of situations there where we've been asked to sell a business with succession in place, where actually the succession, we most likely have one of these every 18 months. And the succession, when you start going through the process, you just start advising what's going to be needed for the younger party to take over. And you find that younger party is actually going to exit with clients because he doesn't necessarily want to take on a larger firm and go through that process.
So in
And that
the
all comes
example
back to that all comes back to recruiting the right talent as well, and being not necessarily just looking at the talent per se in terms of skill sets, but also looking at their, I suppose, softer issues, their interpersonal skills, and the aspirations as to why they want to join your firm. And you need to find people who are wanting to move it forward. So moving it forward means exploring with them the direction of the business, communicating with them what direction it's going to take, and encouraging them to participate at an early stage in developing that strategy.
I mean, it is a lot because effectively they've been operating without, I guess, a true business model, or one that is a more traditional or robust model. They've actually just been all operating independently. And so what you're saying here is that they've got to build up their back office and their operations. And that then has a knock-on effect on the work that they're doing, because the idea is that it's meant to free them up to do different things. So it's a huge change.
Yeah, we're looking for each of them taking on 600,000 of fees. 6 times 4 is 2.45, 2.45 million. Some organic growth, but to do that, they have to free up their chargeable time. And their chargeable time at the moment, when you analyze it down, is not, is doing all types of work. It's ridiculous. It's doing some basic work when there isn't the support within the organization. It's doing some advisory work as and when it comes through the door, but there's not much promotion of that at the moment. So they've got to be freed up They've got to have people that they can trust and delegate to. You're right. It's a 3-year program here going forward, but there is a good possibility they will achieve it with before anybody starts to look at retiring. And the first retirement is about 7, 8 years away. So it's far enough away. If you've got a retirement in the middle of this, where fees have got to be picked up by, one retirement out of four partners, they've got to be picked up by the remaining three. That makes it extremely difficult to achieve the change you're looking for.
There are carrots that are dangling in front of them. One is which they make more money as they go along, and it therefore makes it more attractive. Like you're increasing the value for sale.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
know it's obvious, but they have to kind of see that by building, they're actually building a business to be able to scale up.
They most likely stay where they are in terms of having to invest in the second tier, but that growth, we call it growth pains because you can look at any sole practitioner. If he stays by himself, he has a ceiling of about 450,000, say, that he can manage with a team of people below him without looking for any succession in house, without investing in succession. So when you get up to 4 partners, yes, 1.6 million, they reached a ceiling and they can't really go any further here. They're not terribly attractive in terms of the profitability unless you get a couple of partners exiting. But here, I think there's a good confidence. We've given them confidence that they can achieve 2.5 with growth, improve the profitability, and that will not be bad. That if in 5 years' time they want to go and do a sale, or if in 5 years' time they want to do an MBO to some of these people they've brought on, so be it. That'll be great.
It will be
It'll be
interesting. It will
more
be
value in the
interesting to hear
business.
how that goes
Yeah.
going forward. We have had a question in. I'm going to leave it to the end. We will have a Q&A section, so I have noted the question.
Yeah, the final main slide here is scaling growth through acquisition and merger. So we've dealt perhaps with one of the problems in the last slide, which was suboptimal. We're now looking at when you get to suboptimal, even at a 3 million level, and this is a 3 million, 3-partner firm. They are having difficulty in growing. They've got enough business coming through the door and they're having to turn it away, but they can't find the people to take them from that 3 million, which they think they can do, to the 5 million to 6 million over the next 4 to 5 years. And they're therefore looking, I mean, so they're located outside London within the M25, which is quite a difficult area to recruit people because you can still have the sort of central London premium you're having to compete with. But good practice, very good clients. They've got more client work coming on board. They have got a good second tier and a couple of people who might take over, but they're not right at the moment to actually take on additional business. So they're actually looking to join with another firm, which could be larger. They're looking to join a firm of maybe 2 to 5 million to create something of around 7 million of fees, 7 to 10 million, and putting their business in that business, restructuring the whole, and obviously getting more, if you like, more skill sets involved, more service lines involved, which can be cross-sold, then they think there will be a significant improvement on the bottom line. So in that third line there, we're looking in our modeling for them to uplift fees and profitability through cost selling with a benefit of 15% on the bottom line. So if you join 3 with 3, you should get the existing profit on the bottom line plus an additional 15%. That's what we're looking for in these scenarios. It's difficult to get 30% unless you've really got a totally new service line, which is going to be very rewarding and very profitable. But this is through straightforward merger, possibly overcoming some of your MBO scenarios going forward. but needs a lot of time evolving in this merger, understanding what the other culture is and matching up these cultures to achieve the 15% on the bottom line and therefore scale the growth, and come out of this with growth on the bottom line, albeit with a bigger business, and optimizing partner time and service lines. This is something we've got, as I say, a few consultancies going on with at the moment. They want to remain independent. They won't necessarily remain independent forever. They might, in 5 years' time, accept something, from the consolidators. But at the moment, they're keen to remain independent. They can see their way through. They can see their way of bringing in new, good client business, and think they have got a good commercial approach to building something in terms of a practice that differentiates themselves from the others. So yeah, I mean, see, that's the scaling for growth through acquisition and merger, which really is appropriate really for businesses of maybe even only 1.5 million upwards.
Are these mergers true mergers, Keith, in the sense that obviously I appreciate there needs to be like-mindedness from the two sets of owners, but do you tend to find that kind of, I don't know, culturally, operationally, or even perhaps brand, that one tends to one does end up subsuming the other?
Yes, that's why the chemistry issue is so important. The culture, the way they service their clients, all that is very important. But yes, you're actually going to end up with one brand. That means one is going to be stronger than the other or prevail over the other. But that has to be sold to the clients and the staff and to the ongoing partners
Yeah.
as a real positive, because you're going to get better profitability, better career opportunities for your staff, and more services offered to your clients. I mean, it is not an unusual, it's a very traditional method of merging, but you're right, one will prevail over the other, but it doesn't have to be a subsuming situation that a lot of people fear by going to a PE consolidator and therefore having a totally different method of operation, possibly totally different approach to clients, and perhaps greater uncertainty as the investor moves off and sells within a sort of 3 or 4 year time frame as they flip their investments.
Yep. Good stuff, Keith. It's always fascinating. So you were right on the 45-minute mark. So good good work. And we'll go through the questions. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. We're not disappearing right this second. We do have a couple of questions that have already come in, so I'll broach those. So we've had a couple of kind of quite broad brush questions. I think this first one's going to be tough. I don't think there's actually a right or wrong answer, but someone's asked about considering the maximum age a senior partner should reach before that person should step down. I've known quite a lot go on for quite a long time.
Yeah, yes. I think the senior partner should step down. Well, I think providing they perform, I'm not sure there should be a top end age. Realistically, I suspect there's another meaning behind this question, actually, in that the top partner is getting a disproportionate remuneration. He's holding on to the equity. Maybe he's not collegiate. Maybe he's a good leader. Maybe he isn't. Maybe he's not bringing younger partners on. I mean, say generally speaking, we're still seeing people exiting in their 60s. It doesn't matter what their retirement age is, but
It
they're still
feels like that
retiring.
question is the thin end of the wedge of succession issues, really. Succession being held up or not being managed properly. That's I think what is being inferred, perhaps.
Yeah, well, there is that glass ceiling in terms of which we haven't addressed really in this presentation, which is the age situation and keeping the younger partners. But this is where I come back to communication. It doesn't really matter with that individual whether he retires at 60, 65, or 70, providing he has disclosed his plans, providing everyone knows this is the plan. He will he will start handing over his clients perhaps 2 or 3 years before he exits. This is where the disclosure, and to be blunt, the success of the business will be within the communication of these sort of things to the next tier, and in fact the tier below that. As I said in the prime example, the benchmark example we had earlier on in this presentation, they are very clear when people are exiting, and they plan and integrate. They have a way forward. They have
Yeah.
issues that are going to be raised to be solved down the line, all time planned, to make sure that nothing's overlooked and aspiring partners know where when they're going to be invited to join as
So,
an
I mean, as few as shocks and surprises and the very British unsaids as possible, really. We do have another couple of questions, Keith. I want to
yeah,
just keep
carry on.
moving on before everyone just gets fed up and leaves us. So please stick around. A couple more questions. Home working or hybrid working, perhaps. How is that impacting on recruitment and retention, and is it healthy for a merger? I think try and keep your answer as brief as you can on that one because that's kind of quite an open-ended question.
Yeah, I think this is changing. We've got many clients who are now 100% back in the office. They just will not look at people who, they tell their recruiters, we don't want people who want to work from home, basically. That tends to be the case outside London. London still has a lot of mixed part home working, part office working. Um, I think it's coming around to the stage that if you really want to get an integrated business with experience transferred through osmosis, if you like, sitting in an office and understanding what's going on other people's desks, how they relate to clients on the phone, all this sort of thing, down to the water cooler discussions. I believe it is better in one office where people attend regularly, because otherwise, I think there's a number of stories coming through now that people who came through the COVID period, worked from home for a year, are not perhaps the same sort of performers necessarily as they were if they'd been brought up 100% in the office during their training period right the way
Yeah.
through to qualification.
Thank you, Keith. Well, we've got two more questions. I hope everyone can just stick around for these. Keith, if you can just be as concise as possible for everyone, that would be awesome. And I'll try and be as quick as possible on the question. This is a really, really interesting one. Is there an optimal size? We don't know what size means. I assume it's kind of perhaps by revenues. Is there an optimal size for an independent firm sale? And kind of what size does it get too big for like an MBO or merger or PE route? It's kind of a bit of a funny one. I think it's more circumstances, isn't it, than size?
Yes, I don't think size, what am I going to say? I don't think size matters from the sale point of view, because a PE house would be quite happy to look at an 80 million pound practice plus. I could put people into, there aren't many of them left actually who are independent, but if you came to me with 80 million, 100 million, we could find a PE house who might well be interested in taking you on as a foundation business. I'm not sure that's the question you're trying to look at, though. And of course, you get sales all
I
the
mean, I
way
think you could say that
down.
there's certainly from a consolidation perspective, if you are, say, £1 million firm, that narrows down the consolidators that are going to be interested in you, for example.
Yeah, there are. I mean, see, from consolidated point of view, trying to be concise as possible. There may be 25 of them at the moment. There are a few of those who will look at smaller practices because they are doing bolt-on scenarios. So they'd be quite happy to look at a 1 million turnover practice. There are some consolidators now looking at that level. Whether that's good or bad, you're accumulating good and bad fee bases, good and bad businesses, good and bad size businesses. And it's not necessarily the right solution generally for the vendor, because you're really going to have your business totally subsumed. But I mean, see, there's still a good market in the the traditional LLP limited company business looking for acquisitions where they still have the general practice type approach to their clients, and they are still sharing profit shares among the partners rather than having to pay off a private equity house with some of the revenues of the year. So
One last question. Someone's
yeah,
after a bit of free consultancy here, Keith. If you had a bit of one bit of advice for £1 million turnover practice to grow it to 1.5 mil, what should they do, and how long will it take?
give me a call, send me an email, and we get. I mean, say if we do something like that, we want to know and we want to talk to the party very carefully about what their strengths are, what their client base is, how easy it is to get, where they're spending their marketing, where they're getting the new clients in from. Um, and people have to be very focused on this these days to create something that's going to maximize the bottom line and bring through the best possible solution. So, yes, we are very happy to talk to you about that. I think it's a very general question. How do you grow from 1 to 1.5 million? You know,
Yeah, there are
people,
different ways to take that. I think the answer really is it is possible. You are going to need some advice, and it is going to be a holistic take on your practice and yourself and your direction of travel, your strengths, weaknesses,
yeah, I
and
mean,
then and then go from there. We need that context.
you could go out and buy 500,000, but that doesn't suit everybody. It's much better, and some firms are absolutely rigid. We will not buy. We will spend the money on marketing and making sure we bring on the right client. Because when you buy, you actually get a mix of clients. You get some real bottom ends, which have stuck with a smaller practice, and you get some good quality ones.
The,
Normally,
the, the
people
thing
are
is, as
looking.
you say though, with a bolt-on,
Yeah,
buying 500k of fees doesn't necessarily won't turn a £1 million turnover practice into 1.5 million, because the ramifications of that deal may see you lose clients along the way, and some of those clients won't be appropriate. So
no,
there's a lot of careful thinking to.
you're absolutely right, and that's a consideration. Of course, you are talking here about 1 million to 1.5 million. More importantly, it is going from the profitability line, and whether that profitability, say, starting at 300,000, is actually going to go up significantly to maybe 550,000. Can that be achieved to a £500,000 acquisition? That's what we strive for. Disproportionately larger profits on the bottom line through an acquisition, rather than what it happens in a lot of cases when we do post audits of these deals. They actually reduce the profits per fees on the bottom line even 2 years after the acquisition, which is not in anyone's interest.
So more, basically more fees, but not a commensurate increase in profits.
Yeah, I mean, see, that's the easiest way to alienate all your partners.
uh, Keith, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching us. Keith's details are on screen. Please get in touch with him if you'd like to talk about your firm and its direction of travel, particularly that person that asked that last question. Otherwise, please follow us on YouTube for more videos. Visit foulgerunderwood.com to find out more about us. Read some of our articles that we talk about the practice market itself. You can find us on X and Instagram and LinkedIn. I think we kind of post most rigorously and often. We've also produced loads of videos, so please check those out on YouTube. This video will be archived and available for you to access again in the next few days or so. So thank you very much for joining us. Keith, final word.
No, I hope it's been useful to you. I mean, we were just trying to provide some illustration of how we get involved with people and some of the problems that we see, and that experience hopefully is going to be useful to some of the people listening in today. Look forward to talking to you again in the near future.
Thanks for joining us for this 55-minute session we ended up with. See you all again soon.